When my father called all four of us into the dining room, I already knew I wouldn't be getting anything valuable. He had always treated me differently, like I was the child meant to struggle while everyone else was rewarded. My brothers wore watches he bought them, my sister drove a car he paid for, and I got speeches about responsibility. He stood by the fireplace holding envelopes, smiling proudly as he handed out gifts. My oldest brother got company shares, my sister got the lake cabin, and my other brother got the downtown rental property. Everyone cheered, hugged him, and thanked him. Then he turned to me with a grin that made the room uneasy. "And for you," he said, tossing a small rusted key into my hand, "the old country house." For a second there was silence, then laughter exploded around the table. That house was a family joke: rotting wood, broken windows, a collapsing roof, and miles away from anything useful. My father laughed louder than anyone. "Maybe now you'll finally learn how to rebuild something." I looked down at the key, then back at him, and said nothing. Because 3 weeks earlier, I had already been inside that house, and found something none of them knew existed. I let them laugh that night. I even thanked my father, slipped the rusted key into my pocket, and left before anyone could see the smile I was trying to hide. By sunrise the next morning, I was driving down the old gravel road toward the country house with a truck full of tools, cleaning supplies, and copies of documents I had kept secret for years. The house looked worse in daylight: peeling paint, crooked porch steps, weeds taller than the mailbox, and windows so dirty they looked painted black. Anyone else would have seen trash. I saw timing. 3 weeks earlier, I had come here after receiving an anonymous letter with no return address. Inside had been only one sentence: "Check the floor beneath your grandfather's study." I thought it was a prank, but curiosity brought me out there. I found the study under layers of dust, old books, and broken furniture. Beneath a faded rug was a loose wooden plank. Under that plank was a locked metal box. I couldn't open it then, so I took it home. Inside were deeds, bank records, letters, and one sealed envelope with my name written in my grandfather's handwriting. My grandfather had died when I was 19, and unlike my father, he had always treated me with warmth. In the letter he wrote that he knew my father cared more about appearances than fairness. He wrote that the country house had been purchased decades ago with land extending far beyond the fence line everyone believed marked the property. He also wrote that valuable mineral rights under that land had never been sold, never transferred, and were still attached to the original deed. He said he left everything hidden because he wanted it to go to the only grandchild who never asked him for money: me. I spent 2 weeks verifying every page with a lawyer in town. The records were real. The landlines were real. The mineral rights were real. And because my father had officially transferred the house to me in front of witnesses, everything attached to it was now legally mine. He had laughed while handing me an asset worth more than everything he gave my siblings combined. I opened the front door, stepped into the dusty study, and waited. I had invited everyone to the house that afternoon under the excuse of a family lunch. They arrived one by one, all wearing expressions of amusement. My sister got out first, wrinkling her nose. "You actually came back here?" she asked. My brother Daniel laughed when he saw the porch. "Need money for repairs already?" Andrew stepped inside and looked around. "Smells like failure." Then my father arrived last, sunglasses on, smiling like he was attending a show. "Well," he said loudly, "has reality hit you yet?" I motioned toward the dining room where I had set an old wooden table with bottled water and folders. "Sit down," I said calmly. He smirked. "Planning to beg?" I pulled out a chair. "No. Planning to educate." They sat because arrogance makes people curious. I handed each of them a folder. My father opened his first, skimmed the top page, then frowned. "What is this?" "The original deed," I said. "Read page 3. Andrew flipped quickly. Melissa stopped smiling. Daniel looked confused. My father's jaw tightened. "This can't be right." "It is," I replied. "The country house includes 147 acres, not 12. The boundary markers were moved decades ago, but never legally changed." "That's impossible," Andrew snapped. I slid another document across the table. "Survey confirmation from last week." My father's hands trembled slightly. Even if that were true, it's still useless land. I nodded and opened the final folder. Then let's discuss the mineral report. Silence filled the room. Daniel blinked. Mineral report. I met my father's eyes. Natural gas deposits. Significant estimates. Preliminary licensing interest already submitted. My sister whispered, "How much?" I answered without emotion. Enough that the rental building, lake cabin, and company shares together don't come close. My father stood so fast his chair tipped backward. "You tricked me." I almost laughed. "You gifted it to me." "You knew," he shouted. "I knew what you never bothered to learn," I said. "That mocking something doesn't make it worthless." He paced the room, face turning red. "This belongs to the family." "It does," I said. "And I am family." Andrew slammed his folder shut. "Dad, reverse the transfer." "Already recorded," I said. "Irrevocable." Melissa leaned forward. "We can make a deal." "We?" I asked. Interesting word from someone who laughed the loudest. She looked away. Daniel tried a softer tone. "Come on, we're siblings." "Were you," I asked quietly, "when you watched him humiliate me every year?" No one answered. My father finally stopped pacing and lowered his voice. "Son, let's not be emotional." That was the first time in years he had called me son. "I'm not emotional," I said. "That's why this is happening." I took one more paper from my bag and placed it in front of him. "What now?" he asked. "Purchase offer," I said. "A company wants temporary access rights for surveying. The signing bonus alone is 7 figures. He stared at me as if seeing a stranger. "You do this without consulting me. You gave me the house without consulting me." His mouth opened, then closed. For the first time in my life, he had no speech ready. I stood and walked to the window, looking out over the land everyone mocked. "I spent years trying to earn respect here," I said. "Turns out I only needed ownership." Behind me, I heard drawers of pride slamming shut inside each of them. My father spoke again, smaller now. "What do you want?" I turned back slowly. "Nothing from you." "Then why invite us?" he asked. I smiled once. "So you'd all remember the moment you laughed." None of them spoke after that. They had come expecting ruins. They were leaving from an empire. And they had no idea what I planned to do next. They called for weeks after that meeting. My sister suddenly wanted to reconnect. Daniel suggested we become partners. Andrew sent long messages about family loyalty. My father waited the longest, then finally came to my apartment alone. He looked older, quieter, smaller than the man who once laughed across a dining room table. He said he had made mistakes, that pride had gone too far, that families should stay united when fortune arrives. I listened without anger. Then I handed him a folder. Inside were documents showing the first profits from the land had been placed into a trust for scholarships, home repairs for struggling families, and a care fund for my mother's side of the family, the people who had helped me when he never did. "You're giving it away?" he asked, stunned. "Not all of it," I said. "Just enough to make it matter." He looked at me for a long time, waiting for an offer that never came. "And what about me?" he finally asked. I opened the door for him. "You already took your share years ago." He left without another word. I restored the country house slowly, room by room, keeping the study exactly as my grandfather left it. Some nights I sat on the porch and listened to the wind move through the fields, grateful for the insult that changed everything. They thought they handed me a burden. What they really handed me was freedom. They didn't lose money that day. They lost access.